Okay, as I mentioned, Lade's receiver is getting very poor reception from 4 p.m. to around 8 p.m, varying roughly, and so are other tuners on global tuners as we have a look around. Anything in Sweden or Norway is having problems at these times as well. As I start to learn more about shortwave propagation myself, and I've been clicking around on the net and reading a lot, come across a site explaining how the atmosphere is distorted over the North Pole, because that's of course where most of the ionic storms happen, when the solar storms hit the planet, because of the pole. Now, this means that the ionosphere over the North Pole is very distorted, and it just happens that over Estonia and Sweden and Netherlands, where these receivers are, the ionosphere is very distorted, so that makes reception particularly difficult. If we listen to radios in Vienna, for example, at the same time, then we get absolutely clear reception of the buzzer, and found exactly the same with radios on the south of the UK in London and in Devon. But if listening from Edinburgh, then no buzz is received at all. So anything in the northern hemisphere, upper reaches, is having real problems receiving this winter due to heavy solar storm activity. It's a struggle listening to the stream at the moment. Don't be surprised if you hear a lot of interference, a lot of channel bleed from reflected signals due to the distortion. Presented, this is for you now, your bit on why the call sign has changed.
Alright. Before I get to that, this is all from the Numbers and Oddities newsletter of October 2010. And first what it says is it talks about that the transmitter site is just that. It's just a transmitter site. It talks about how really everything's phoned down from St. Petersburg over to the transmitter and just transmitted from there. Which
we've come to realise is quite possible, considering the PBX style interference we discussed on the last show. And
do you want to talk about that phone call first?
No, you carry on. We'll get to that afterwards.
Well, it wasn't as publicized, to my understanding, super much. But on the first, the president of Moscow, president of Russia, I'm not even going to attempt to say his name. I'm going to fail horribly. Is because the military districts of Russia had merged into 4 new districts: the Western, Northern, Southern, and Eastern strategic commands. And each area has its own little radio station to communicate with each other's. UVB-76 used to be part of Moscow's, but the reason for the call signs change, which happened around the early September, was because 2 of them, St. Petersburg and Moscow, merged, and this changed it to MDZHB. Now, St. Petersburg used to have something else. I believe it was Plavets. No, it was not Plavets 41. I'm looking on my notes. I'm not exactly sure what it used to be, but now it just has 2. It has MDZHB and this other one.
Yeah, so what we're basically looking at is they've redistributed the military districts. They've put in a new, say, chain of command, or they've reallocated resources, possibly to do with the recession.
We have the Central Strategic Command, and I'm not going to name that city. It starts with a Y. If you want to look it up, you can. It has the R beacon, which is called Plavets 41. We have the South Strategic Command, which has the PIP in Rostov-on-Don. We have Leningradsky, which... Actually, no, yeah, that is part of the new Western. That has the squeaky wheel in it. So the Western Strategic Command has a squeaky wheel and MDZHB.
Exactly. So, a redistribution of the military command districts has led to the function of the transmitter changing. It may be that the buzzer and MDZHB are sharing the same station, whereas before it was just UVB, UVB's purpose is the buzzer, but the call sign has changed for voice messages because the district has changed.
No, that's not right. It's all MDZHB. UVB-76 is the call sign for that transmitter.
All right, the retired call sign. Yeah.
Yes, the retired call sign. It was the buzzer and the voice messages. It was just naming what the station is, and they did nothing but change to the name of that station. That's all that happened.
Okay, but also there's been more allocation of resources under that section, most likely, hence the increase in messages to daily, would be the reasonable explanation we're looking at.
Yes. And also the November 2010 newsletter, this isn't as related. It discusses other parts of the Soviet network, and if you listen to the last podcast, we talked about a station called Vulcan, and I'm just going to read a small snippet from the latest newspaper or newsletter. I'm cutting out a lot of these call signs just because I probably can't pronounce it. The call signs mentioned in the calls are part of a strategic network. I don't know what stations are live these days. During the Soviet days, the network included, amongst others, as the following stations, or multiple stations here, in Vulcan. Now, Vulcan is obviously still around, as we heard it being communicated with just a few weeks ago, and it was all part of something called Radio Network number 43, or 143, depends how you translate it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Vulcan is a recurring word in association with UVB activity, isn't it? We've encountered it in multiple sources when we've been looking around.
It seems like that's a code name for MDZHB, such as Riabina for S32 or the squeaky wheel. It's just a code name.
Yeah, but it's interesting. If the Russians are supposed to be keeping this stuff secure and unknown, they're not doing a very good job of it.
Well, again, as my theory goes, it's just simply the high-frequency global communication system, basically, of Russia. Not for their Air Force, but for their military and army and such. That's my theory, at least.
Yeah. The other thing we've noticed in particular, looking over the messages, we have to give a lot of praise to Danix here, because he's built a fantastic study page, keeps it updated with all the changes of UVB and its activity. If you're not aware of it, have a look at http://danix111, that's danix111.cba.pl/ns/UVB-76.html. This page contains every message that we've managed to find that's been broadcast. Of course, some of the earlier ones are speculation, so watch out for the ones with the UVB call sign. They're mostly from internet reports. We can't verify recordings of all of them. But the ones with the MDZHB call sign should be more or less accurate. Danix done a great job of collecting these. We've got a list of the oddities, but one of the things we've really noticed, and we'd like to bring to your attention in this podcast, because we haven't analysed the messages up until this point. We've only really covered UVB's activity. But the important thing is, we found duplicates. Lots of duplicates. The messages that are being broadcast are not one-time pad encryption numbers or codes to be used. They are command words. There isn't exactly a code to crack. Let's give you an example. Particularly interesting example is we've got crosses between UVB-76 broadcast and an MDZHB broadcast. So on the September of the 5th, 2010, it's probably a mistaken call sign, we guess. One of the last UVB messages was UVB-76 16703 Brigrada, Pregrada 80 18 06 57. This was broadcast again on November the 7th and on December the 1st. Interestingly, it was 20 to 2 on September the 5th, 20 to 3 on November the 7th, and 20 to 3 on December the 1st. So interesting time correlation with the same code word. In each of these examples, the number set and the code word are identical. So for all three, Frigrada, and for all three, 80, 18, 06, 57. This proves conclusively that this is not a one-time pad encryption code being used to send messages to spies in foreign lands. It would be useless as this kind of system, as we'll demonstrate with our talks about cryptography in later shows, because a one-time pad needs to be exactly that, one time only. If it's repeated, it can be broken, just like any other code, and the secrecy is lost. So, what we're looking at with repeated code words is we're actually broadcasting code words, not ciphers. The code words would be stored in a military handbook used by the radio operator to communicate tasks to military districts. Now, I'm not a military guy, so I can only give you a rough speculation. Hopefully some of you will be able to suggest better meanings for the code words. If you do, email them in, let us know. Tell us on the forum, tell us on the IRC. But a guess would be, one code word means raise your alertness level to the next level up because there is an impending attack. The second code word is lower your alert level because there is no threat anymore. This is an example. We would expect perhaps regular communication if it was those particular kind of messages, and considering the broadcast is once a day, it's unlikely.
But we don't have that many people monitoring the other stations. But we have indeed noticed an increase of traffic between this and the PIP.
Mm-hmm.
Probably we've had one message, 2-3 messages a week actually with the PIP. So there is obviously some talking between them.
Or relation in their messages due to them being separate military districts, but using the same familiar code words or commands, that kind of thing. One of the things I noticed recently, clicking around, is a few of the messages reported, either by the PIP or the squeaky wheel, I can't remember which in particular, were using exactly the same format, although not a repeated word that UVB has used, but exactly the same format of word and number combination.
Formerly, they did only 4, number, etc., over, and now they have been doing the same high priority alert messages. That's what these are called. They're high priority alert messages.
You could draw a random conclusion that UVB was important in the past, and perhaps the squeaky wheel and the PIP weren't so important, and now they've had their status upgraded or their function changed as a whole. So maybe UVB has basically stayed what it should be, and the PIP and the squeaky wheel have changed their function completely.
I'm sure that they're all important, just classified.
Okay, so messages are duplicates. This is interesting because it makes it very frustrating for us, because what it really means is UVB isn't a number station. We haven't got any codes to crack.
Well, no. It depends what you define a number station as.
True. Yeah. Of course, any strange shortwave broadcasting numbers and word combinations could be considered number station, but since we can be reasonably sure now that this is actually a military communication station, do you think it counts, considering the general definition of a number station is that it's broadcasting to spies in foreign countries?
Yeah.
Would you say that rates a difference, that it's a different kind of station?
I'm sure that it could be classified as a military station. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Alright. Okay. Right, moving on from duplicates, we did have a before we do, we shall play you 2 different duplicate messages here.